Surely you can't be serious.
I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Oh, Captain, my captain.
I'm telling you straight, it's my way or the highway.
Oh, command me, Lord. Now you want to get nuts? Come on, let's get nuts.
Tell me something, my friend. You ever dance with the devil in the pale moonlight? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
I'll have what she's having.
You have chosen wisely.
It reminds us of all that once was good. And it could be again.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious...
You're listening to the 30-something movie podcast. Classic movies, 30 years in the making. This is the 30-something movie podcast, episode number 245, marching on towards 250. And tonight, actually, we have Jeff, the orchestrator of episode number 250. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm pulling all my strings for getting episode 250 together, trying to make all you puppets dance.
There we go.
There it is.
Dance. All right. I'm looking forward to that one. So I did re-narrow down my list with some honorable mentions. So I think I'm ready. I'm ready to go now. I consulted my many spreadsheets.
Yes, of which you showed me earlier. And I'd like to say I felt bad for making you go back and re-examine your list, but I don't feel bad at all.
No, you shouldn't. I was probably going to do that anyway.
Unlike Pat, who's had his list solid and turned in for months now.
And I'm not thinking about it, because if I think about it, then bad things happen. Remember today, we just had a conversation today, Jeff, and there was a whole, but you brought up a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, but those are 90s cartoons, right? And you're like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, please tell me they're 90s cartoons, right? And then sure enough, nope, these are in the 80s. Ah, shoot. When's the deadline for that thing? Oh, wait, I can't do it. I can't think about it.
Well, so I will say the bulk of my list was turned in months ago. I did make a couple of changes, but
all right.
Most of it has stayed pretty solid. But all right, so we are on episode number 245. Episode number 245 is the last entry in our month of May, our movies we missed month, where we're going back to years in the 80s, either years we didn't get to because we started our podcast after that point, or movies that just did not make the cut in some of our other years that we've done. So we've reached the end of it. This month we've gone from Cannonball Run to The Dream Team to American Werewolf in London, and we are ending it all with E.T. from 1982. So
Yay.
Awesome way to end this month. Let me jump very, very quickly into our spoiler alert. We spoil the movies we talk about. So I don't know who hasn't seen E.T. at this point, but if you haven't seen E.T., go watch the movie and then come back, because we're going to talk all about it. If you have not left us a review on iTunes, we would greatly appreciate that. It helps other people find our show and helps us know what we're doing well, what you're enjoying, things that we could try to do differently if there's some stuff that you'd like to leave us some feedback on. But that would really, really help us out to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, even if it's not iTunes. And then ultimately visit our website, 30podcast.com. That's got all the different ways to connect with our show, whether it's on Letterboxd or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it might be. The voicemail line you can call into, that's going to be the best place to find all the stuff about our show, as well as all the past episodes. So you've heard their voices already. I've got Pat Canigallo with me tonight. Pat, how you doing?
Doing well, John.
Excellent. And Jeff Mazuka.
Hello.
Howdy. And Jeff, we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this was your pick. E.T. was ultimately your pick for the movies we missed month. So we have you to thank for this episode.
Well, you're very welcome.
Yes, many thanks.
Gracias. All right, so two things very quickly for our news section here. And one of them, actually, I mentioned last week, and I know that Jeff is a little bit more of a fan of this, so I'm going to mention this, even though it was mentioned on last week's show. First, before we get to that, I was reading today that they are doing a Honey, I Shrunk the Kids reboot. Have we heard about that?
Maybe I have.
Okay.
I want to say I have heard about it, and I tried to forget about it.
Okay. The only news that I know is I was reading something earlier today that Josh Gad is the primary actor that they're looking at for the Honey, I Shrunk the Kids reboot. So I don't know if he'd be playing the role of the father or how that's going to work out, but that's all I know about that. So I don't have a whole lot to share with it. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Mm.
And then I asked last week, but this is not his cup of tea, so I'm going to ask it this week because I know Jeff does enjoy this. The trailer for It Chapter 2 came out. Did you have a chance to watch that, Jeff?
I still have not yet had a chance to watch it.
You haven't? Okay.
No.
All right. Did you watch the first one?
I finally got around to watching the first.
You did. I figured we talked about that the other day.
Yeah. It took a while. As I'm learning, having a kid just really sucks up a lot of your free time.
Well, you should watch it with Thomas. I mean, he's probably okay with that.
Well, I kind of did. I was home with him. I was home with him one day, and afternoon nap time came around, and I just was holding him, feeding him, and he fell asleep in my arms. And I'm like, whatever. This movie's on demand. He's sleeping, so here we go.
But it's a movie with clowns, so kids are going to like it.
Yeah, I mean, what's not to like about clowns? Stupid
Right.
poltergeist clown doll.
I know. Ruins it for everybody. It's sufficiently creepy. Like it's when you get a chance to watch this trailer, it does a very nice job of like the beginning of the trailer. Actually, the first 2/3 almost of the trailer are not really scary at all, but you feel so uneasy watching it. It does a great job of being a trailer that does not give anything away about what the story of this movie is going to be if you haven't read the book.
See, I like that.
Yeah.
I like being made to feel uncomfortable, not grossed out, not gory, but something's just a little bit off.
Yes, you will feel that way when you watch this trailer.
Very Hitchcockian in that way. Just play with my mind a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. You'll enjoy the trailer then. So, all right. Well, that's all I got in terms of news. So let's jump into.
I've got one thing.
You got one? Go for it.
So there's another podcast out there called The Disney Dish, and episode 208 is they're interviewing someone that was at the press preview for Galaxy's Edge in California.
Oh, nice.
And she talks all about going on some of the rides and the restaurants that she saw and the shops that she saw. Really cool stuff. So nice. Episode 208 of Disney Dish podcast. So it pairs nicely with our Galaxy's Edge episode that we did.
Cool.
Okay. All right. I will add a link to their podcast in our show notes so people can go take a look for that one.
Yeah, it was
very cool.
It was really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Here, and it got me excited to eventually one day get there and check it out.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's jump back to the DeLorean. We'll head to 1982. We're looking at the week of about the last week in May of 1982. So a couple of things that happened in this week in 1982. On May 28th, Pope John Paul II is the first reigning pope to visit the United Kingdom since 1531.
Wow.
It's a bit of a drought.
Yeah.
Was it 451 years?
Yeah.
If my math is right.
A certain interval of time has passed.
They were a little sore about the whole Henry VIII thing, I guess, and it just took a while. On May 30th, I almost said May 50th. That's not a number. On May 5th, I just about said it again. On May 30th, thank you. Cal Ripken Jr. plays this first game of his 2,632 consecutive MLB games.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's just crazy. Just to think of being able to play that many games without missing one.
I remember watching the clip of him achieving the record.
Yeah.
And then there was a clip of him when he eventually finally sat out a game, and just the ovation that he got with knowing that his reign and having set that record, came to an end. It was a really neat baseball moment. It wasn't about rivalries. It wasn't about a certain fan base. It was everyone just showing their appreciation, including the players on the opposing team, just showing their appreciation for the feat that he accomplished.
Nice.
Cool.
All right. Top book for this week in 82 was The Parsifal Mosaic by Robert Ludlum. The top movie was Conan the Barbarian, directed by John Milius, featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger, James Earl Jones, and Max von Sydow. Top song was Ebony and Ivory by Paul McCartney and Stevie Wonder. If anybody wants to sing it right now, you totally can.
Yeah.
No?
I'll take the pass.
You good? Okay.
Yes.
All right. All I can do, I would start singing it right now, but the only one I can think of is the parody one from Saturday Night Live with Eddie Murphy.
Yes.
Yeah, not missing that one.
No.
All right. So let's hop on our spaceship and let's go visit E.T. The title of this one is E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. Came out on the 11th of June, 1982, rated PG, with a runtime of 1 hour, 55 minutes, directed by Steven Spielberg, who did a couple little movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, that kind of stuff.
I think I've heard of one of maybe two of those.
Heard a couple of those? Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought his name was Spielberg, but I guess it's Spielberg. So, yeah.
I'm not familiar with his work.
Spielberg, Senior Spielbergo.
Him, I know.
You know him, okay.
Yeah.
Producers Kathleen Kennedy and Steven Spielberg. Kathleen Kennedy, I think she's done a few things too. Maybe our entire childhood.
Was she related to John F. Kennedy?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. She did Back to the Future. She produced Back to the Future, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Spielberg also produced Poltergeist and Gremlins. Writers on this one were Melissa Matheson, who died in 2015. She also did The Indian in the Cupboard and The BFG. Cinematography was done by Alan Davio, who did Empire of the Sun and The Color Purple. Music was done by John Williams, who also did the Star Wars movies and Harry Potter movies. Budget for this one was $10.5 million. The box office was $792.9 million. Rotten Tomatoes critics gives it a 98%. So here's kind of an interesting one. The critics give it a 98%. The Rotten Tomatoes audience gives it a 72%.
They are wrong.
Wow.
Beyond wrong.
Wrong.
Yeah.
Sit there in your wrongness and be wrong.
Be wrong.
It sounds like we got some people there just kind of deliberately dropping the score.
I don't know why, how. It doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
There's zero reason why this should be anything less than the critic score.
Right. Well, and then so I looked at the others, IMDb, because any of the ones that are more like user scores and not critic scores, the Rotten Tomatoes audience gives it a 72%, IMDb gives it a 79%, Letterboxd gives it a 78%. So all of the audience scores are in the 70s, whereas the critic score is almost 100%. So that to me seems weird and off.
Yeah. I wonder why. If anyone out there listening has issue with ET and for some reason, let us know. I'm very intrigued by the fact that it can't, the audience rating can't climb out of the 70s.
Right. Now, I know my sister hates this movie, but that's partially my fault.
Well, she's wrong, so she can also sit there in her wrongness and be wrong.
She is wrong. Now, the reason I will say very quickly, and then I'll get into the actors who are in this movie, the reason she does not like it is because she's very freaked out by E.T. Oh. Like she does not like the design of E.T. It freaked her out as a kid. And I didn't help because I told my parents, I kept convincing my parents that she loved this movie. And I don't know why they listened to me and not her. So we went one time and got her the movie poster to put up in her room.
Right.
And I kept telling my parents, she loves this movie. She would love to have this poster up in her room. And they put the poster up in her room and it stayed there for several years. And I continued to torture her with the ET stuff. I don't know why they believed me when she kept telling them she hated it, but so that's partially my fault. And I do apologize for that because it's an amazing movie.
Yes.
All right. This movie is starring Dee Wallace, who played Mary. She was in The Hills Have Eyes and Critters. Henry Thomas was Elliot. He was in Legends of the Fall and The Haunting of Hill House. Peter Coyote played Keys. He was in Patch Adams and Aaron Brockovich. Robert McNaughton played Michael. He was in I Am the Cheese. Drew Barrymore played Gertie. She was in The Wedding Singer and Charlie's Angels. K.C. Martell played Greg. He was in The Amityville Horror and The Munster's Revenge. Sean Fry played Steve. He was in Real Genius and Valley Girl. C. Thomas Howell played Tyler. He was in The Outsiders and The Hitcher. Erica Eleniak played the Pretty Girl. She was in the 88 version of The Blob and The Beverly Hillbillies. And Pat Welsh died in 1995. She was the voice of E.T. She was also a voice actor in Return of the Jedi. Here's the trailer for E.T., and we'll be back in just a second.
In 1975, he directed Jaws. In 1978, he directed Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In 1981, he directed Raiders of the Lost Ark. And now, Steven Spielberg brings us E.T., the Extra-Terrestrial. We will witness the arrival, the search, the desertion, the fear, the discovery, the friendship,
I'm keeping him.
the secret, the love, the warning, the signal, the mystery, the danger, the intrusion, the wonderment, the enchantment, the hope. The connection has been made. Universal Pictures presents Steven Spielberg's E.T., the Extra-Terrestrial.
Okay, I am not even going to assume that this is the first time anybody's watched this movie.
That would be yeah, go with that.
We're correct on that? Okay, all right. Now that that's out of the way, how much do you love this movie? First of all, Jeff, I'm just going to ask you because you picked this movie. So what was it about when you got the call that we were doing a movies we missed? What was your process in kind of narrowing it down to, all right, I've got the whole of the 80s, anything we haven't already covered. How did you get from there to E.T.?
It was a process because I went from the decade of the 80s and I had my list down to like 13 or 14 movies. And I just kept going over and over and over the list and crossing one out here, crossing another out there over the span of months until finally I got down to like 2 or 3 movies and I was just looking at it and I kept going back to E.T.
Mm-hmm.
I kept looking at what movies, what movie do I feel is too special to pass up? Too important to pass up. And
just out of curiosity, what were the ones that didn't make the cut? Were there like 1 or 2 that lost out to ET that were in like your top 2 or 3?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, Empire and
okay.
Return of the Jedi was on that list.
Okay.
Raiders was on that list.
Yeah.
Caddyshack was on that list. War Games was on that list.
Okay.
I honestly don't even remember the rest of the movies that I had.
Okay.
I had about
that's a good list.
maybe 3 or 4 per year up until 1984 when we started. And I just kept I kept hacking away at the list a little bit, and every time I would look at ET, I'm like, I'm not ready to scratch it off the list. And like I said, I narrowed it down and just got to a point where I was like, it has to be this movie.
Yeah.
I keep looking at this movie with such fondness that it's one I have to choose.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I was listening to some kind of behind the scenes stuff for ET, and it sounds like there was a bit of a process to getting this movie made. That he was, he wanted to make this movie, and he wanted it to be a friendly alien, not like some of these other movies where the aliens come to Earth and they all want to, kill everybody that's here. And so he got in touch with the woman who ended up being the screenwriter for it. And he was telling a story. I think it was like a behind the scenes featurette. I don't remember if it was on the DVD or the Blu-ray. And he tells the story of how he and her just kind of sat down and just knocked this first draft out in about 8 weeks. And that he just completely fell in love with the first draft. And he busted into a meeting between Kathleen Kennedy and somebody else. And he said, we could start filming this tomorrow. This is the best first draft script I've ever seen. And apparently even to this day, he still feels like that first draft of ET was the best first draft he's ever seen of a script. So that kind of tells you something right there. You see something special in it right away.
Yeah, and I think that shows in the product, in the end product, how carefully he crafted all of it.
Do you remember the first time you saw this movie?
No,
okay.
I don't. I remember though being scared of the first time that E.T. We actually see E.T. when Elliot's out in the cornfield looking for him, and he shines his flashlight on him, and E.T. screams and Elliot screams, and the flashlight kind of waves around, so you don't really get a good look at E.T., just a couple of flashes of light. And I remember being really scared of that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And again, I think that goes to how Spielberg just crafted making this movie. We as an audience don't know anything that Henry doesn't know. Not Henry, Elliot, played by Henry. We don't know anything that Elliot doesn't know in this movie. It's, whatever he knows, that's the only knowledge we have. And you can see examples of that as the movie goes on. Just one of the very smart ways that Spielberg shaped this movie. But we have more time to talk about that as this podcast goes on.
Yeah. Yeah. Pat, do you remember the first time you saw it?
I don't. I remember seeing it as a kid. I mean, because I remember when I was pretty young, and I remember having the like a picture book you could read along to, and saying all the E.T. phone home and just being kind of immersed in the whole E.T. deal. But I saw it young. I don't know that we necessarily went out to the theater for it. But yeah, I remember seeing it as a kid.
Yeah, I don't remember the first time seeing this either. It's one of those that I think, for the three of us, maybe if Dennis was here, maybe he being a little bit older than we are, he might have seen it in the theater. But this is probably just one of those that we were just too young to really go see it in the theater. And I don't either remember the first time I saw it. I remember watching it a lot as a kid. This is probably several times a year viewing movie for us, but I don't remember the first time seeing this. I do remember just the bits and pieces of, hey, I've got those Star Wars toys too. Or, hey, I also love Reese's Pieces and would be willing to eat them up off the floor. Just random little things like that. And, there are definitely, I can't picture the first time I saw this movie, but I can picture, Jeff, like you said, being scared of that first time you see E.T. I can picture what I felt the early times that I watched this movie. Like I still, watching this movie, have just this very vivid memory of being so bothered by the scene where E.T. is in the hospital bed, and all the medical staff are working on him. And I remember that as a kid and just thinking, oh my God, this is one of the most horrible things I've ever seen. And I didn't fully understand what was going on at the time either. Because
it's not explained.
Right.
And again, that's another one of those ways that Spielberg really kept it true to Elliot's point of view.
Mm-hmm.
We as an audience, we don't get the explanation of what's going on. We just have to assume and put together enough pieces of the context to be able to figure out that he's really sick and they're trying to help him. And and I think that it really goes a long way in what makes this movie very special, because as a child you're able to relate to it. You're able to relate to Elliot. And Pat, I've mentioned to you a couple of times that another one of the things Spielberg did is he shot most of this movie from a lower camera angle, so it would be in the eye line of a 10-year-old boy, or a 10-year-old 11-year-old, as opposed to an adult. Again, it's bringing us into Elliot's world and letting us view things and experience things with Elliot.
Yeah.
He mentions in that behind the scenes featurette that I was watching, he mentions, Spielberg, I think this featurette was from the mid to late 90s, and might have been like the 15th anniversary, sometime around then. And he says, yeah, I didn't want the perspective of this movie to be any higher than that of somebody who's like 14 and a half years old, however old the brother Michael is supposed to be. He said, that's why you don't see, it's almost like Charlie Brown. You don't see the teacher's face. You don't see, the people at the beginning of the movie. You don't see those guys' faces when they're, trying to hunt E.T. down. It's really, Michael is the oldest brother. That's really the most adult perspective you get in this movie. Even the mom, he made a comment. He's like, well, even the mom is not that she's childish, but in a way she's very childlike in how she interacts with the kids when she's reading the stories to Gertie, and she's very relatable, even to the kids, even though she's an adult. Right. He said that's really why she's the only adult that gets factored into this. And I liked one of the things he said about E.T. He said, if you think of this movie from E.T.'s point of view, that he said, I wanted to make a movie where E.T. shows up and he gets lost and has this adventure on Earth. And then when he goes back to his planet, he's going to tell all of his people about, the world of Earth as he experienced it with the children of Earth. Like, not with the adults. He's going to go back and he's going to talk about his adventure, and to the rest of the ET people, it's going to seem like he had this adventure on a planet that was populated by children. And that would be ET's story when he gets back home.
Right. I like that.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. I never thought of it that way, but I'm like, no, that fits perfectly with the way the story is told, just the feeling you get, and especially watching this as a kid, you do relate to it so much, because it's like, it's not demonizing adults. It's just they're outside of everything. Like, they're not as involved in the story.
And again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but Elliot's point of view, he doesn't know what the deal is with the adults.
Right.
Neither do we. We don't know what caused his parents to be separated or divorced. We don't, we don't know what the backstory to that family is. All we know is what Elliot knows, and Elliot knows that Dad is in Mexico with Sally.
We know he hates Mexico.
Yeah, and you get a lot of great reactions from the mom, from Mary, that when you look at it from the viewpoint of a 10-year-old or 11-year-old, it's very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of what this movie is about. E.T. is the metaphor for Elliot, I feel. Elliot wants nothing more than to go home, to find that home that he once knew.
Mm-hmm.
And we experience that journey home, or trying to get him home, through the experience of trying to get E.T. back home. I mean, this movie is about so much more than a boy and an alien and their friendship and their adventures. There are so many levels to unpack and really discuss what's going on.
Had you heard the early ideas for titles for this movie?
I want to say I have, but nothing comes to mind.
The original working title for the movie was A Boy's Life.
Huh.
Okay.
And then, of course, you end up with the movie Mac and Me later on in the 80s. But the other working title for this one, actually further on, before they shortened it to E.T. In fact, I think actually right before the movie came out, the movie was called E.T. and Me. And that's what it was. And I think on some of the, I don't know if it was promotional materials, but in an interview, I was listening to some interviews, and with Henry and Drew Barrymore, they were talking about getting the script and everything else. And they remembered, they're like, yeah, this movie was called E.T. and Me, like right up until I feel like it was, brought out in the theaters or the posters came out or whatever it was. But it originally started as A Boy's Life and then switched to E.T. and Me, which I thought was kind of funny because then later on you get Mac and Me, which is, similar type story. Not as good, but similar story.
No, nowhere near as
not
good.
Anywhere. No. It's like the difference between a gourmet burger and White Castle.
Yes.
There's some differences.
You can eat at White Castle. You might even be nostalgic for something at White. I don't know why, but it's not good. I did want to say too, just in terms of, you were talking about the reactions in this movie, and the way that some of the actors handled it. I was looking around on YouTube a little bit for some other stuff, and I found the original kind of screen test for the Elliot actor.
Oh my God, isn't that heartbreaking?
Oh man! And did you watch it? If you watch it all the way through, you get to the end of the whole thing, and Steven Spielberg, like right on the spot, he's like, "You got the job, kid." He's like, doesn't even hesitate. As soon as that's over, he's like, "You got the job, kid." And I think he's heard talking about it later on, and says, "We just were in that room with him, and everybody in the room was in tears." And immediately we knew that that's our Elliot. Basically what they did was, I guess they gave him some lines to read, and that kind of went okay. And then Steven Spielberg was like, okay, well, hold on just a second. Now let me just give you a scenario. E.T. is this alien that you've befriended. He's friendly. Think of him as like your dog. Think of him as like a pet or your dog. And this man here, he's from the government, and he's going to come and he wants to take E.T. away. So now we're gonna start with that. And you hear the man read. They're not even necessarily reading lines. He's just saying, we're going to take E.T. away. We need to study him. We need to talk to him. And just the kid, Henry Thomas, he just starts to break down. And some of the ways that you see him kind of break down in the movie, you're seeing almost the exact same. The tearing up and the crying that you see in the movie, you're seeing the same in the audition. And I'm sitting there going, this kid's amazing. Mm-hmm. Like, no wonder they cast him as Elliot.
Yeah, I mean, after you look at that casting session, you just, like Spielberg said, you got the job.
Yeah.
I don't know what else you're going to be looking for, because even in that casting session, he was so in that moment, and his emotion was so real and so raw that to think you're going to get a better performance from a child actor, I don't know what you'd have to be smoking to not recognize what's in front of you. So kudos to Spielberg for finding Henry Thomas and just kind of running him through those scenarios and recognizing what he was capable of.
I am from the government. I'm part of the United States government, and I am empowered to take that alien with me.
But you can't take him away. He's mine.
Well, but the government is bigger than you are, Elliot, and I have all the authority to take him, and I gotta tell you, I'm gonna take him.
You can't take him.
Well, I'm afraid I have to, son.
You can't take him away, he's mine!
But it's not my choice. The president asked me to come here and get him.
I don't care what the president says, he's my best friend, and you can't take him away!
Well, it's real possible, Elliot, that he'll come back, and you can have him again, but we just want to talk to him and see where he came from and try to find out about other planets. And he probably is the key to a lot of things that we have to know.
But how do I know you're going to bring him back?
Well, I'm afraid, son, I can't guarantee it.
I think he's afraid of you.
Yeah. And he also said that when they were doing the casting stuff, he said right away he knew that, I guess, Drew Barrymore, when she was 4. Yeah, maybe 4. She had tried out for Poltergeist. Mm-hmm. And he immediately said, because he was, there's the talk that he was really kind of the director of Poltergeist, uncredited, but that he was the director. And I guess she tried out for it. He's like, no, you're not right for this part, but we've got another one that we're going to be doing very, very soon. And I want you to come in for that one. And he said that she came in and she's like this 5-year-old kid, and she comes into this like casting session, and she's just making up these huge stories. She's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a punk rocker, and I'm going to go on like this 20-city tour of the US. And her stories are just getting more and more elaborate. And he's like, nope, okay, you got it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the Gertie character I want. Like I want someone who's kind of precocious and very cute little kid. And he's like, nope, we're good. We're done. You don't need to say anything else. So it sounds like the casting choices were made pretty quickly for this movie.
But that may be. I don't know how you cast it better.
Right.
I
think he hit it. I think he hit it without maybe too much effort on his part. It seems like he, it did sound like they looked through a whole bunch of different Elliots and that they just couldn't find one. Because it sounded like they didn't find an Elliot until they were really close to starting to film. But it just sounds like once he found, like he knew right away, this is my Elliot, this is my Michael, this is my Gertie.
Huh.
I find Michael to be a really interesting character.
The more I watch this movie, I really like his character. Other than Elliot and E.T., like his character might actually be one of my favorites in this whole movie.
Well, I mean, his character is in a really tough place because Dad is gone. So you can see that, throughout the movie, the struggle he has with trying to be the man of the house while being ill-equipped to do so. He's, Dad's not around. Dad hasn't taught him how to be the man of the house. Dad hasn't taught him seemingly much of anything. So he's trying his best to kind of assume that responsibility to ease the burden on their mom. But he's in over his head when he tries to do that. He wants so badly to, I think in his own way, try to bring the family back home again. And he doesn't know, like I said, he doesn't know how to do that. He thinks he does. He's trying to figure it out, but he leads, just ends up making more issues than what he really wants to have happen.
And I love his reactions in this movie. Just that first reaction when he sees E.T. for the first time, that has got to be almost one of my favorite scenes, I think, in the whole movie. Elliot's walking him through the whole thing. He's like, you've got to swear the most excellent promise that you can. I was like, yes, say it. I have, ultimate power. Yes. And that whole thing. And as he turns around, just the way his face drops.
Yeah.
That is probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. That gets me every time I watch it, is just his reaction to seeing E.T. for the first time.
Yeah.
And just again, don't want to sound like a broken record, but just the performances you get out of these kids in this movie, the whole movie, if the kids don't work in this movie, the movie doesn't work.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to believe these kids, and these kids have to believe in what's happening. And some of the behind the scenes stuff that I watched, there's footage of the day that they filmed E.T. dying, and how inconsolable Drew Barrymore was.
Yeah.
Because she was so convinced at this point that E.T. was dead.
Yeah.
And this being that in her own childlike way had grown to know and love and care about, there was no consoling her.
Yeah.
And that shot that you get in the movie and this is one that breaks me all the time, is when they bring the paddles out on E.T. and they charge the paddles and shock him.
Yeah.
And the camera cuts to Gertie, and Gertie just jumps when she hears the sound.
Yeah.
And just starts breaking down in tears. You don't get any adult there explaining to her what they're trying to do. She's seeing her friend suffering. She's scared by it. And it's so heartbreaking when you really put it into that context. And again, that's why this movie works so well, because everything is through that filter of the child. So that when things do go right and E.T. is rescued and is able to fly away with his with the other ETs, that's why your heart breaks when Elliot says goodbye to him, because you've grown to love him the same way that Elliot has grown to love him. You've grown to appreciate him and everything that he's done for Elliot, because you're viewing that and experiencing all that with Elliot. So then at the goodbye scene, you are also saying goodbye, just like the others had to do.
Yeah. you're invested and have skin in the game, so to speak.
Yeah,
as much as the characters do.
Absolutely.
And so much of what they do in this movie, they're taking, you get a little taste of some adult situations. They got to sneak him out of the house, but the way they got to sneak him out is through the most, child-friendly of holidays, Halloween, when everybody's got a costume on and you can just, walk around in costume and nobody thinks anything of it. Then you've got, towards the end of the movie, you have, in any good action movie, you've got some kind of a car chase. You do have a little bit of a car chase, but then it quickly switches over to a bicycle chase. Because, every time I watch that bicycle chase, I keep thinking of, oh my God, I loved riding my bike as a kid.
Yeah.
Like now it's a bit of a chore to ride a bike, but as a kid, I loved riding a bike. Like that, I could even picture myself, riding through, not the same kind of locale, but we had some spots around my neighborhood that were kind of hilly, and you ride through some areas like that, and just I remember picturing that as a kid, and it's a very kid-centric way to take that idea of the car chase, or you got to sneak somebody through something, so you do it in a Halloween costume, and they just do such a great job again of bringing it to that kid's perspective. I don't want to get away from the movie itself, and I know that we've got more to say about it, but that also thinking about the the Halloween scene and the bicycle scene and all of that, I know that we definitely have to talk about the music in this movie.
Oh yes,
because holy buckets, to steal Jeff's phrase. Okay, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, John Williams really outdid himself with the score to this movie, I feel. And
didn't you tell me he feels this is his favorite of his own work?
Yeah, and Pat found an article in which John Williams alluded to this work being his, I think, like his most cherished piece.
Okay. In the article, did it say why?
Well, I recall, and I think I passed it on to you, Jeff. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember him saying that the bicycle scene was like, in his eyes, the perfect union of music and on-screen filming. It was like, it just lined up perfectly. And I think that's why he picked that being his favorite score. Was just the way that lacked in with the bicycles.
That makes sense, and I agree.
I honestly don't remember what his reasoning was, but I think this is my favorite John Williams music. I have the soundtrack. I only recently bought the soundtrack. For years, I've had a John Williams compilation album, and it had it was called The Flying Theme. So that I would listen to over and over again. It's about a 5-minute piece of music. But it wasn't only until maybe 2 weeks ago that I actually bought the full soundtrack to the movie, and it is just glorious.
Yeah.
But I love what John Williams does with the music, because the first 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the movie is all told in music. There's no dialogue. You're seeing things, and again, you're seeing things from the perspective of a child. The camera angles down low,
right,
and you don't see any of the faces of these grown-ups that all of a sudden storm in trying to capture E.T. You get your introduction to Keys, and you hear the music that's played once these adults show up, and you get the sense of dread. You get the sense that these aren't nice guys. These aren't the good guys. And of course, a lot of this stems from having listened to recently the podcast show. I'm loving the hell out of that podcast, or the soundtrack show.
Soundtrack show, yeah.
I'm loving that podcast so much, and it's really getting me to think really heavily about music in movies, and the idea of characters having themes. Having melodic themes, and where's that gone? Why doesn't that show up in movies anymore? But it had me thinking and listening really hard for specific themes throughout throughout ET. So you get a little bit of that thematic work in the beginning. But I gotta tell you, the piece of music that I love the most out of this movie is the suspenseful buildup. Well, there's two parts. The suspenseful buildup that goes right into the flying, And I think it's I have no idea in what meter this music is written. I don't know if it's written in 4 and 2 or whatever, but it's a series of 16th notes. That whole thing, it builds and it builds, and then it happens once as Elliot is riding his bike just with E.T. When it happens again later in the movie, when it's the group of boys and they're trying to outride the government, outride the police, John Williams telegraphs what's going to happen. He brings that whole thing back, that whole flying theme, that introduction to the flying theme back. You don't sit there and you don't sit and go, oh, well, they're just going to be able to fly over these guys. This music is just driving you forward, from the escape to the chase to the eventual breaking free and then taking off and flying over the police cars. That just leads then to the last few minutes of the score is also incredible. You have so many smaller melodic things going on as underscoring as E.T. is saying goodbye to Gertie and to Michael and to Elliot. And then you have some full orchestration moments that just build and crescendos and just I don't know. It's so beautiful what he does with this music. Yeah,
that end of we brought up the ending scene where ET's saying goodbye to everybody. Number one, I can't make it through that scene. Like I have been watching it a little bit off and on this time, just because I didn't have a whole lot of time to sit down and watch it from beginning to end just in one sitting. But I was ready to finish it the other day, and the kids were in the house with me, and I was like, okay, before you do anything else, because they want to play some video games, I said, before you do anything else, I got to finish watching ET. You guys want to watch it with me? And they're like, oh, okay. And we're getting to it's the last maybe 15 minutes of the movie, the whole bike chase and everything else, and we get to that ending scene, and there's not a dry eye in the living room.
Yeah.
Like between the kids, between myself, and a good portion of that has to do with the music. Like there are certain scenes in movies, and I know it sounds ridiculous, and I know that some of these things are like not things that a normal human being might necessarily tear up at, but there are certain movies where the music that accompanies what's going on with the visuals on the screen, when I hear that music, it's like you said, that music is driving you towards knowing they're getting ready to start flying. There are certain musical cues that will drive me towards, oh God, here we're going to start crying now. It's that final piece of ET. Like and especially when the music is just building at the end of the movie and the ship flies off with the rainbow and Elliot is left standing there, that part, the whole goodbye scene. But when that music just builds to that ending, I completely lose it. Can't handle it. It's the same thing when I watch, I've given the example of Rogue One. Like I have a hard time in Rogue One when Chirrut dies, when he's going for the switch.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as that starts, as soon as that music is playing, and as soon as he's chanting his "I'm one with the Force and the Force is with me," like I know what's going to happen. And then as soon as he dies, you get the music is playing again, and some of that stuff. It's just the musical cues and the emotion that goes along with them. This movie that has always gotten me from when I was a kid to an adult. I cannot get through that last scene of the movie without being impacted.
I think that's what I love about the music, is because I hear it and I can feel all that emotion again. And like you can hear it's all sorts of pieces of music, and it can be really thrilling and adventurous and exciting, but something about this music brings me to feel so much more than that. I'm feeling it's like the sadness, the realization of having to be sad in order to be happy. Henry, Elliot knows.
Oh, you still there, Jeff?
Yeah.
Yep.
We good?
Jeff, did we lose you?
Okay. No, I'm here.
I got Jeff. Can you hear me, John?
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I lost you for like 3 or 4 seconds.
Oh, okay. But I was going to say, Elliot knows that he has to say goodbye to E.T. He has to let E.T. go back home. It doesn't mean it's easy for him. And, when I can picture his face and him in a crying whisper saying, ouch. You just, you feel that to your soul. And if you don't, then you don't have a soul.
Right.
If you're not feeling the emotion of that goodbye scene, then something happened to you and you've lost ability to empathize.
Right. Even more for me, even more than the ouch, when he says the ouch part, is when E.T. says home or come and Elliot says stay. And you just the E.T. just, it's amazing design for the E.T. creature. Just that look on E.T.'s face of just heartbreak. And that they were able to get this mechanical rubber suit, whatever it was for that particular scene, just to convey that emotion, is just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, this movie's so,
and that's
so
a whole
wonderful.
That's a whole other story too. I was listening to a couple of things on the design of the ET creature, and originally they went with Rick Baker, who's done so many other creature creations. They went with Stan Winston. Rick Baker, I guess, made a whole bunch of aliens for this, and they said, no, sorry, we're really just going with one. Then they went with Stan Winston for a little bit, and he's like, well, yeah, that's not really quite what we're looking for. And just some of the stuff that they did. I don't know if you guys are aware of this one. They were mentioning the thing that I watched, that the person who does ET's hands was a mime artist. And they got that because they knew that people who work as mimes, they're very intentional about their movements. And they said, if you just watch E.T.'s hands in this movie, that's why they wanted to do that. They actually just painted, or they put some prosthetics on a mime's hands. And they knew that this person was going to be very intentional and very, convey emotion through their hands. and you have so many of those great scenes where one of Steven Spielberg's favorites, he said, was when E.T. is sitting there eating food, when the kids are just sitting around and talking to each other about E.T. He said there's a moment when the person doing the hands, I guess there's a little piece of food that is just like sitting on the lip of the E.T. Puppet, and the hand reaches up and just kind of just takes that little piece of food off just very gently. And Spielberg is like, I love that. He's like, that's a little detail that I would not have even thought of. Just the movement when you see the scenes of, E.T. putting his hand on Elliot's shoulder and just stuff like that. He's like, there's no way we could have done that with a mechanical puppet. It had to be done by someone like this. And that's why he said, that's why I went with a mime, because I just knew they're very intentional about their movements. And I wanted someone who could convey emotion through the movements of their hands.
Pat, did you have any specific music cue that you hone in on when you watch E.T. or think about E.T.?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be able to do anything that other than just agree with what you said, because everything you said was just, in my mind, just right on and just so eloquently stated. And so I'm going to end up not recapturing, but just reiterating that. But I think that, I don't want to say this falls in the cracks, but I just think that, whenever I think of John Williams music, I'm always thinking of Indiana Jones and Star Wars. And I always think of those. And I think this one is it silly to say right up there with them? And I don't, again, it's like, it's not that it's fallen in the cracks, because E.T. is just such a fantastic movie and we all know it. I mean, it's got, the 98% on Rotten Tomatoes critic score. But I think that every time I put the soundtrack on, it's just, you're right. I mean, you hear some of the hallmarks of John Williams in there. I mean, you recognize it as his music, but it creates a whole different set of array. A whole different set of array. What does that mean? A whole different array of emotions in you. Like, I think your daughter says it gives you all the feels. And, and it's just amazing that soundtrack can do that. And what musical cue do I love? I really like the bike chase. I mean, when they take off on that, and I mean, I was rewatching scenes, before we signed on tonight, and I like it when they take off on the bikes. And I don't know if it's considered the ET main theme. I've got to go into the soundtrack and find exactly what they call it. But right when they take off on the bikes, and they do something with the rhythm, and it's like the strings have this repeated thing, this and it kind of gives this pulsing feel, and it's not. I mean, like I said, it messes with the rhythm to kind of keep you off balance. And the melody, you just know something huge is going to happen. It has that da 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 ba-dum, boom, and then you get this real big hit, and the kids are all sitting there pedaling their bicycles, and I mean, that's just really cool. And I mean, the music really just captures that feeling of being a kid and knowing that something awesome is happening. Whether that's you name it. The first time, you go tearing off down the road with your buddies on a bicycle. The first time you get a ride on a motorcycle. The first time you go up in an airplane. The first time, name any cool experience, and that could be the soundtrack for it.
Yeah.
And there's all the different pieces. And I mean, I'm not going to try and like suddenly do what the host of the soundtrack show does, but you could just break down all the different pieces of that right when that chase scene starts, and you can just track that to that repeated figure that's keeps you a little bit off balance, the really exciting soaring melody, and then you get this punch right in the gut from the low voices, and it's just cool. And so I guess as far as musical cues go, that scene with the bikes would have to be my favorite. And again, but you go through the whole movie and it's just scored so well that it just tells you exactly how you're supposed to feel, and maybe not it's supposed to tell you exactly how it's to feel. They're telling you exactly what the intent of the movie makers are. The music just really frames the whole movie. And I'm gonna throw something else out there. It always amazes me in E.T. because when I go back to it and rewatch it, because it's not something that I watch like every month and all that, but we watched it with the kids in somewhat recent memory, and they loved it. But it amazes me because there's no surprise. You see the aliens right away. That's what it starts with. So there's none of this kind of fiddly farting around with, well, are they real? Are they here? Are they not? Do you believe? Is the kid going crazy? Is he not? It's like the audience is in on the story. You get what I'm saying? So the fact that the movie can still put you on the edge of your seat with, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? And emotion and excitement and suspense, which I guess was what I already said. But that's all happening with the music. It's like, there are aliens. Okay, there's an alien that got left behind. That this alien's really a good guy. That all these things. You're not being taken by surprise with it. And I don't want to just list movie titles and say spoiler alert, but I think of all the other movies that deal with like alien encounters, on Earth, and you're not quite in on the gag the same way you are with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of uncover it as you go. So there's this degree of suspense already kind of just built in to the story, because you're like, okay, is this going to end up being a gag? Is this going to end up being real? There weren't any, but in this, it's like all the cards are out on the table. The story unfolds in a different direction. I mean, and obviously, like we said, the story is about, Elliot and him trying to figure out his place in the world and the family and, I don't want to say a broken home, but, a house with a divorce. And, that's kind of what the focus of the movie is. But again, all this, since that there's an alien out there, all of this emotion is really created with the music, and maybe not just created with the music, but it's helped along with the music. Even though that for this story in this world, there really are UFOs and all this kind of stuff, it still puts you on the edge of your seat with what's going to happen to them. It really just helps advance the story so well. The way the music is played, it's just awesome.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you 100%. It's hard to envision this movie without this specific music. Like, if you wanted to do an experiment and try dropping other pieces of music in this movie, I don't think you'll find anything else that does this story justice, that accompanies the acting performances so well, or as well as what John Williams was able to do with it. And it gets at the end, it gets wrapped up so beautifully with this full orchestral sound. I every time I hear that part, right, every time I hear the end, I have to stop and just take a breath and just let it almost wash over me. It's so wonderful.
I always wonder too, like, some of the movies that we've watched on this for this podcast show have been the foreign language ones, and sometimes the subtitles don't pop up, when they're up in the Google folder. So I've watched them, and it's just like, how much can I pick up, and it's like with this movie, I bet you I would still get about 98-99% of what they intended if it was in a different language,
or no dialogue at all,
or no. Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if this went top to bottom, just visuals and music, I'm pretty certain that we'd all still be able to feel the exact feels that we were supposed to at whatever time we were supposed to in the movie.
Now, I have a question for you guys. It's not part of our 5 questions, and it's not about music, so I don't want to interrupt. If you've got anything else you want to say about the music in the movie.
I like music very much.
I don't know what that was, but I agree.
That's about all there's left to say.
Yeah.
So here's something I was wondering, because this has kind of been my take on this for quite a while, and I want to know if anybody else had this take on the actual character of E.T. I always thought from when I was old enough to think through these things a little bit more than just a kid watching a movie going, this is fun. I have been under the impression that E.T. himself is either a child or is more of like a rookie going on his first interplanetary mission for the first time, and that's one of the reasons that he strays behind and gets lost. I don't know if that has ever come up for anybody else, or if that has ever even like entered your thought process, but for a really long time that was kind of my take on this, was like, well, what if E.T. is young for his people? What if he's kind of like a kid? Or what if he's like, this is his first mission and he kind of messes up getting back to the ship on time because he's being chased, and he's lost, and so he doesn't have the experience of his other people. Has anybody else ever, like, have you ever thought through that piece of it before?
I have hardcore since we started podcasting. Like, in the back of my mind, I've been like, I wonder, no, he's probably a kid. No, I've been going back and forth for the last hour, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really given it much thought.
Okay.
I've never tried to put that in any sort of context before.
Yeah. And not even necessarily that he's like a kid, because you wouldn't take a kid on a, botany mission. But, just that he's younger, maybe like a younger one of his people. And this is his first mission or something like that. And he just, through his inexperience is why he gets left behind. So I don't know. I just, for a few years now, that's kind of been my thought that's running through my head, but I've never heard anybody, I don't think I've ever heard Steven Spielberg say one way or the other, or I've never heard anybody else say one or the other. So I didn't know if that's something that you guys had ever thought through before.
No.
Okay.
I've started recently kind of thinking about, I mean, like Jeff, in our discussions, and you've talked about how ET is a metaphor for Elliot, sort of, or
yeah,
like, am I overly simplifying the statement that you made?
No, I don't think so.
Or maybe ET's experiences are related to Elliot's experiences or whatnot. I guess that kind of got me thinking. And then you didn't ask, well, what is he? Is he a kid or an adult? But I mean, I could totally see where, it's just two kids trying to get through,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Just recently, I've really started to kind of like, geez, I wonder about that.
In 2002, for the 20th anniversary, E.T. was re-released in theaters.
Yes. Went to go see it.
However,
It was awesome.
It was re-released with additional footage, and so scenes that had been cut were put back in, as well as updated graphics, specifically with E.T. and his face and his facial features, because Spielberg had said at the time, if CGI had existed, he definitely would have employed it to really be able to express or have E.T. show more expression and more emotion. And one of the biggest changes that he made is towards the end, as the kids are riding their bikes and they're approaching the police barricade, he removed all the guns, all the visible guns, and replaced it with all the officers holding walkie-talkies, and even added a line in there, no guns, they're only kids.
Which, watching it this time, because it had been a little while since I watched it, watching it this time, that line seemed really out of place because nobody's walking up with guns. Like, I picture that as like when the mom says no guns, is that she should be watching people run up to the van holding guns, and she's yelling at them, they're only kids, no guns. So to me, watching it this time, I was like, that line doesn't fit because nobody's holding guns. So why say that? She would be more panicked if she sees people walking up with handguns.
Well, so he got a lot of feedback about having made significant changes to the movie.
Yeah.
Kind of like what George Lucas did with the Star Wars movies when those were re-released.
Right.
And, he added all this extra stuff and did this, that, and the other. Spielberg has gone on to say that he regrets making the changes because it wasn't the movie that people fell in love with 20 years ago.
Right.
Okay.
And so now when people ask him, which version of E.T. should they see, he says, go with the original 1982 version. That's the one that he gave to the audiences. That's one that the audiences have cherished and fallen in love with and adored for years. It was almost irresponsible, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, irresponsible of him to make changes to that movie.
To mess with the magic.
So he learned his lesson in that, once you put it out there to the fans, it's their movie. That's why on Blu-ray, you can only get the original release.
Okay. We have, I have the Blu-ray. I don't remember which version it is because the one we watched this last time was the one that I have. That's the digital copy that I have through iTunes. And it had the walkie-talkies as opposed to the guns.
Did it? Okay.
Now it had the two guys at the end of the barricade that have rifles. They still hold rifles. Like they still have shotguns. but everybody else is holding a walkie-talkie instead of a handgun. So I don't remember if the shotguns were cut out before, because there's a very distinctive shot of you see the guy like cock the shotgun right before the kids get close to the barricade. And I don't remember if that was removed when they did the 2002 version of it.
I'd have to go back. I have both versions on DVD. I bought the 20th anniversary DVD set. It had the original and the added footage one.
Okay. Pat's got my copy, so he'd have to tell you which one I have.
My problem is I watched it and then I can't remember, because then I was rewatching, like trying to find the musical cues, and I was just pulling stuff up on YouTube, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, there's got like the fun thing I found on YouTube was the original, because the guys were walking around with handguns and all that kind of stuff. So I'm confused now what I remember seeing, because I watched some on YouTube and some on the one you loaned me.
Okay.
So the question that I have is, how do you guys feel about directors going back and making changes to movies umpteen years after they originally were released? Is there something to the idea that once it's released, it belongs, it's no longer your film, it belongs to the audience, and it is irresponsible to try to change what the audience has grown to love? Or is it the director's movie and the director can do whatever he or she wants to it?
Well, if they're good changes, then it's okay. But if they make bad changes, then, you're meddling. It's kind of my initial reaction. And I'm saying that only partially tongue in cheek. And then I also kind of get into the thing too, where it's like me trying to when I cut my own hair, my sideburns. Oh, this one's a little high. I'm just going to tweak it just a little bit. Oh, shoot. Now it's unbalanced. I got to go to the other side. Oh, wait. No, and then all of a sudden, I've shaved my entire head. And it's sort of like, that's kind of the thing I get into too, is like how much tweaking and fidgeting with it before it's just, you're tweaking and fidgeting with it just to tweak and fidget with it.
Well, and the obvious example is the Star Wars movies. And I think in that example, my answer is yes, because I feel like when I went to go see the special editions, when those came out, I thought, oh man, this is awesome. Like the way he's gone back and changed some of these things, the Battle of Yavin at the end of the first movie. I'm like, this is great. Like this is, just the what he's able to do now with the CGI and the dogfights and all that. That's amazing. Now I'm kind of at a point where those came out and that was really cool. And the added scenes were cool and some of the other stuff that they did. But when he's gone and done more, when George Lucas went and did more editing as more DVD or Blu-ray releases came out, I was like, oh God, okay, just that's probably enough. Like we can stop now. So I think my take on it would be, as long as the edited versions don't completely replace the original theatrical ones, I'm totally fine with it. Like if you get, for years, people have been asking for a clean, unedited theatrical version of the Star Wars movies. And I have them on a flash drive somewhere. Somebody went through and created, what did they call them? The despecialized versions of the Star Wars trilogy. And they have taken, I'm trying to remember all the sources that they took. They have taken pieces from the Blu-ray releases, the Laserdisc, like all of the most high definition video they could get. They've taken those, they've run them through programs. It's taken years for them to finish, but they've tried to create, at that point, I think it was Blu-ray quality, maybe 4K quality video of the original Star Wars movies. So it's what you would have seen if you went to the theater in 1977, just in like 4K quality for today. I wish they would release something like that, because now that I have I have every version of Star Wars that's ever been released, and I'll go through and I'll watch them, and I love the special edition stuff, but there are times when I just want to go back and I just want to watch the straight up theatrical ones. Like I want to see the old, like there are certain things that I prefer about the old ones. I prefer the old music in Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. I prefer Luke not screaming when he falls down the shaft of Cloud City, because his scream sounds like Kermit the Frog screaming to me. I definitely prefer, Darth Vader not saying no when he's about to throw Emperor Palpatine down the pit. The one I really don't like, the one that I didn't like even seeing it in the theater, was I love the line when Darth Vader is starting to leave Cloud City to go back to his ship. In the new version, he says, alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival. And then you have this whole extra scene of him getting on his shuttle, flying his shuttle back to his ship, landing in the ship, getting off of his shuttle and walking down, the walkway. and it takes this extra time. The original was Vader rounds the corner, you can tell he is ticked off, and all he says is, "Bring my shuttle." And then it just clips to the next scene of the Falcon being chased by TIE fighters. And to me, that's so much of a better, like, I love the original more than that. So I'm kind of in the camp where, just like Pat's saying, if the changes are good, I like the changes. But if you're going to make those changes and say, all right, I've made my special edition now, I will never make the originals available to anyone ever again, because this is, as a director, this is my definitive vision. This is what I'm giving the public, and this is all you get. Then I'm not good with that. I want everything to be available. And if I want to see the original untouched version, then let me see that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm much more of a fan of the original, any original movie being put out. You know, it, like Pat said, you know, with his Sideburn analogy, at some point you have to sit there and go, okay, maybe I've done a little bit too much, and instead of just tweaking a couple things here and there, I've started to really significantly impact the product.
You're not a fan of Hayden Christensen at the end of Return of the Jedi?
Not one little bit.
Oh, that one made me mad. When I got the Blu-ray and I saw that one, I was like, whoa, no, whoa.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, I was just like, what?
I started pulling Anakin lines from Attack of the Clones. I can't breathe.
Yeah.
I hate sand.
He makes me so angry.
I'm going to kill women and the children too.
I like the scenes where they opened up like Cloud City, you know, where they weren't running through a hallway, but you could see outside, and like where you see the, you know, some different shots of like the Millennium Falcon, big surprise, like taking off and flying around. But it's like, yeah, just keep it simple like that. Like we don't need to, like you said, add and you know,
right.
The stuff that opens up the world more, I liked. The stuff that just seems like doodling or fidgeting or adding more stuff, you know, hanging more things on the tree. That gets to be okay. That's okay. Whatever.
He asks each traveler 5 questions.
It's impossible to answer.
Impossible because you don't know the answer.
Nobody could answer that question.
You've got to ask yourself one question.
What are you asking me for? I don't know.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. And may God have mercy on your soul.
All right, so our 5 questions this time around. Question number 1, favorite place to ride a bike? This can be either as a kid or an adult.
Do we need to clarify what sort of bike for Pat?
I'll assume bicycle.
Let's go with kid's bicycle, or go with a bicycle. It could be, you don't have to be an adult riding a kid's bicycle. I would say growing up in Texas, we had kind of it's almost like a combination bog and quarry that we're not too far away from where my house was, and it had some of the same, you know, you have in this movie, you have kind of like the leveled ground where they can like fly down the different levels of the housing development that they're in. We had some spots that were pretty similar to that, and we had some pretty steep hills that, you know, I remember the neighborhood, there was this, like, one of the streets, it was kind of a steep hill going all the way up. We'd ride our bikes all the way up to the top and just coast down the entire way. And that's, to go back to the music for a second, that's why I love the music in that scene, and the fact that that's the power that E.T. has, is he's going to make this kid fly on his bike, because every kid, when you ride your bike down a hill or you're riding your bike fast, you're imagining yourself flying. So to me, that's why that's such a perfect fit for the music and that whole scene, and the fact that they're on their bikes riding it, because I remember that as a kid, just flying down these hills and thinking, what if my bike just picked off the ground?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that was just me feeling that way riding the bike, or if I remember watching E.T. as a kid and thinking that. But that would be for me. There was an area kind of close to our house where we had some similar topography to what they have in the final scene of this movie.
Anywhere and everywhere. I mean, as a kid, it was just such a great feeling of freedom, you know, going out with the family on bike rides, you know, where you go trails and all that kind of stuff. But then, you know, if I wanted to get to my friend's house, and, you know, where I went to school, it wasn't necessarily a neighborhood school. So I had friends that I went to school with that would have gone to completely different, they didn't quite live on my block or nearby and all that. So once I could get on my bike and, like, you know, pedal one town over and go see my friend, and then we'd get on our bikes and then go up to the movie theater that was like 2 towns over. And that was just the greatest thing ever, because you could just like head out. And I think about that now, just like, dang, that was pretty cool. And it was, yeah, I mean, you know, we'd meet and play a football game somewhere. Everyone's on their bikes. And you know that phrase where you just say, "Look at that." I think you said it today. All the kids are out on their bikes, or like Stranger Things. They're all on their bikes, and it was just like, maybe kids do that nowadays, and I'm just not a kid, so I don't see it. But I just remember that, and that was just like, dude, that's just pretty cool, you know. So anywhere was good because you could go anywhere when you had your bike.
Yeah, I agree. I have very fond memories of in my neighborhood when I was a kid, and riding bikes was that. I mean, that's what we did. You know, I mean, to borrow a scene from My Girl. You know, when Veda says to Thomas J, "Hey, you know, do you want to go ride bikes?" Like that was it. It's not, do you want to go ride bikes to the park or to the store or whatever. Just, do you just want to go ride? And I remember just we used to do that all the time when I was a kid, all over the neighborhood. You know, we had a couple of parks nearby that we'd go to. We had a little newsstand that rented movies. You know, we'd ride our bikes over there and get a movie and a snack, and you know, we'd have races around the block. Who was faster that day, and putting playing cards in the spokes and you know, getting that sound going, you know, trying to do tricks, and you know, who can leave the biggest skid line across the sidewalk. And yeah, no, I haven't ridden a bike in years, and I'd probably have a heart attack if I tried at this point.
It's just like riding a bicycle.
No, that's not true.
But yeah, no, I think riding bikes is, I have a lot of fond memories of doing that as a kid.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mentioned like leaving leaving rubber in the driveway and skid marks and all that. Dominic had his bike out the other day, and we got our driveway we got our driveway redone and then seal coated. And the other day he was out on the bicycle. You know, it was well, we're mid-May, so I'll just say just recently when it stopped snowing. And he's out there, and Tammy's like, "Go look at the driveway." And he's out there, and there's all these lines up and down the driveway. And Tammy's like, "Dominic, and he's just like, whoa, I'm really sorry about that, but look at this. I can draw lines all over the driveway." And it's just like, yeah, kid, you get it. It's pretty fun.
All right, question number 2. What is your favorite childhood Halloween costume? And I had to specify childhood because some of us have not stopped dressing up.
That's right.
I'm gonna go either Dracula or Superman. Like, as a kid, the like Dracula vampire kind of thing was always one of my favorite costumes to wear for Halloween. You know, I always had, you know, you had the Chewbacca costume that was really just like the plastic mask, and it was the I don't know what the material was. It was kind of like tablecloth material that it had everything kind of screen printed on it with the name Chewbacca, you know, right across the front of it. And I was like, that's not really, Chewbacca doesn't have his name tattooed on his chest. Had a Spider-Man costume when I was a kid. I really loved the Superman costume that I had at one point, but my mom would not let me wear it without wearing a mask, even though I reminded her many times Superman does not wear a mask. She said, no, it's a Halloween costume. You're wearing a mask. So it would have been more fun had I not had to wear the mask, because it's not accurate, and she just didn't understand that. But I'd go with either one of those two. It's usually, well, and usually because I like the Dracula, because that was about the only time I was ever allowed to use any kind of fake blood for my costume.
Okay, I'll say, I mean, one time I went as Spock one year, and that was pretty cool because I got the ears, and my grandmother could like make anything. And so my grandmother would, like, all my costumes, like growing up, were all like handmade because my grandma could like literally sew anything. So I'd say the Mr. Spock costume was pretty fun. But I'll tell you, the most niche costume I ever went, I think it was kindergarten. And I went as one of the Emperor's Imperial Guards.
Oh, nice.
You know, all red. And I mean, it's like, dang, I'm thinking like, and I did that, and it was kindergarten or first grade.
That's kindergarten back in the 80s. I mean, that's
I mean,
pretty good for a kindergartner.
Yeah, I know. And that's like a deep cut, you know, like that's like when people are like, oh, are you supposed to, you know, who are you supposed to be? You know, because there were teachers that, like, you know, Star Wars was still, like, now everyone knows Star Wars, but I mean, like back then that was still like, oh, look at what these kids are into kind of thing. And I was like, I'm one of the guards for the Emperor. Oh, okay. And I'm just like, it was like, haven't you seen Star Wars? Yeah. So I guess that would have been the most niche one that
the only kid who one-ups you is the other kid that comes in, you know, for kindergarten. And he's like, well, I'm one of Emperor Palpatine's prefect advisors. If you go to the time code 1 hour and 36 minutes and you see them talking with him as he turns away from Darth Vader, that's who I am.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
that's outstanding. I love that.
Yeah.
Do you have pictures of that costume?
I will look it up now that I'm saying.
I'd be curious to see.
Yeah, what it looked like. But my grandma made it. I mean, so it was
Nice.
literally like red robes and like a red hood that I pulled over myself.
Nice.
So yeah.
I feel like my costumes as an adult have gotten a lot more creative.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would have to say when I was a kid, when I dressed up as Roger Rabbit.
Nice.
That might have been probably my best Halloween costume or effort as a kid.
Okay. The only costume I can think of that wasn't like a, like your typical Dracula or, something like that. I was the Ninja Gaiden from the video games. I had a costume that I'd come up with from that Nintendo game. That was probably one of the only ones I can think of that was not, as a kid, not like a straight up, I'm a vampire, I'm a ghost, I'm a whatever. All right. Let's see. Question number 3. Favorite movie with friendly aliens. So I had to think about this one for a little bit. My lovely wife was helping me brainstorm some ideas because at first I was like, okay, I can't think of any. And she was like, well, Cocoon. I was like, oh yeah, Cocoon. Okay, that one could work. And then I started, I went to the computer and consulted the Googles and got a whole bunch of other ideas. So I've kind of narrowed mine down. I was looking through a list and I was like, well, Superman's an alien. So if that one counts. But then I was like, no, let's shy away from that one a little bit. So I kind of went through and I was like, well, there's Cocoon. If we wanted to do Superman, I guess you could do that. But then the ones that I kind of came up with were my runner-up was District 9, because I really enjoyed that movie. But I think, and I'm having a hard time narrowing it down between these two, I think I'm either going to go Arrival, because I really like that movie, or Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And I think I got to go with that one.
Man.
Was that yours?
That was high on my list.
Okay, I'll take Arrival then. You can take that one. So was that going to be your final choice?
I don't know if it'd be my final choice, but it was definitely in the running. I mean, E.T. might be my ultimate friendly alien movie, but Close Encounters, Flight of the Navigator.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that one. Should have thought of that one.
Batteries Not Included.
Mm-hmm. You didn't go with Mac and Me?
No, God, it's such a tough choice.
Yeah,
there to not include Mac and Me.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. E.T.'s probably the top of the list, but Close Encounters, Superman if we want to include that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I probably would have put E.T. at the top of my list. I was going to go with something that wasn't E.T.
Okay.
But yeah, if we're including E.T., that's probably at the top. But if we're not including E.T., I'd probably go Close Encounters, and then Arrival would be a pretty close second. Did you ever get a chance to see that movie?
I did not.
Okay, it's pretty good. It's good. It's got some. Well, actually, I don't want to say anything because it might give it away. But it's good. Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner are in it. It's got a lot of good language stuff in it. So being a language arts writing teacher, you'll enjoy that.
Cool.
Favorite movie with friendly aliens?
Star Wars.
Okay.
Chewbacca. I mean, that's
yeah, that's true. I didn't even think about that.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah.
You guys did? Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
We were going through it. We're like, yeah, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Arrival, Cocoon,
Flight of the Navigator.
Flight of the Navigator.
Batteries Not Included.
And see, at one point, I even had Guardians of the Galaxy listed on mine, and I was like, well, maybe that doesn't. I guess it would count, but
well, should we? Do you want to keep it for like Earth?
No, we don't have to.
I mean, because that could like change the show. I mean, I could real quick come up with some, but yeah, that's the first thing when I saw that. All
right. Well, if the question is which friendly alien would you most want to hang out with, I'd go Chewie.
Mm-hmm.
Chewie could be my co-pilot anytime.
But you're saying like if we're like living on Earth and these things show up as opposed to a distant.
I think maybe that was the original thought, but that works too.
Okay, then friendly.
I don't want to take Chewbacca away from you.
Well, that's fine. Let me think. Just friendly aliens. Well, define friendly. I'd say like Vulcans.
They're not trying to kill you or probe you.
Okay. I'm just flashing back to Cartman gets the probe, and then he chucks the rock and hits the Klingon battle cube. I mean, okay.
You guys.
I remember when that came out. So if it has,
I haven't seen a kid run like that since.
If it has to be that kind of thing, then I would say I would have to go to the other big franchise and just say like Vulcans, Mr. Spock.
Okay.
I would say like Mr. Worf, Klingons, but I mean the Klingons don't necessarily have the history of being friendly. So
yeah, they're not your cuddliest of aliens.
Exactly. So I'd say Mr. Spock. I mean,
if Worf walks up to you and says "ouch," that's going to be something slightly different than ET.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. But if we're, but are we putting like a cuddly stipulation on it or?
You know, I mean, we're just saying friendly. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to like snuggle with them.
Okay, then yeah, I'd say Mr. Spock.
Okay.
And if you have to snuggle, then I would say the Vulcan from the Enterprise series.
Okay.
Yeah. Then,
good answer.
Yeah. I forget her name.
Was it T'Pol?
Wait. Yeah, it was T'Pol.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
So.
All right. If we're going cuddles, I'm still going Chewbacca.
Okay.
Okay.
There was a car that drove by the other day, and it had the Klingon symbol on the back, and the bumper sticker said "Just wharf it." I don't even know. I don't know what that.
We did. My mother-in-law's Mother's Day card. We translated "Happy Mother's Day" into Klingon.
There you go.
And put it on her card. I can't even say it right now, but the way we translated it was something like, "It is the day of mothers. Enjoy it."
That's cool.
So
that's cool.
All right. Question number 4. Do you believe?
What about Grig from Last Starfighter?
Oh yeah,
Grig's awesome.
He was pretty friendly.
Mm-hmm.
For that matter, so was Centauri.
Yeah.
Up to your old Excalibur tricks, Centauri.
Oh, the Death Blossom. All right. Question number 4. Do you believe aliens exist? That was my response. I think I sent Jeff, did I send you the GIF that was the picture of Mulder at his desk? Yeah.
Yep.
I want to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Pat?
I don't have the evidence to the contrary. I don't think they're going to be coming down to like beam me up anytime soon. But I don't have any evidence to the contrary, and I suppose it'd be pretty arrogant to just say anything with any certainty. So how's that for an answer?
Let's just say sure, and I hope they're friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want them to be ET and not like xenomorphs.
Well, I hope they're friendly. I hope they bring back Elvis.
Oh, it is late enough in the evening where that's a lot funnier than it probably should be.
Yeah.
That's not funny at all.
That's such a good reference, though.
There you go.
Oh man.
Oh boy.
I believe that there's aliens as much as I believe that there's Bigfoot and Loch Ness and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is to say, I've not seen evidence to completely dispute it.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of, pulling Pat's answer a little bit, who am I to say that definitively yes or no? So, it's a big universe.
Well,
there might be other life out there. And if it's intelligent life, as people use that term, then hopefully they're smart enough to know to leave this planet alone and let us suffer our own fate.
Well, hey, Jonathan Frakes hosted that alien autopsy, so I trust him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, every time I think like, okay, the galaxy and the whole thing, then I read just excerpts from, was it, what did Stephen Hawking's book, what was that called? A Brief History of Time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just like, oh boy, there's a lot out there that's just beyond me. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where did I put my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic? Yeah, it was, so, yeah.
All right. 5th, final, and possibly most difficult question. M&M's or Reese's Pieces?
Yes.
Okay.
I think for me, surprisingly, I would go M&M's over Reese's Pieces.
Okay.
Why surprisingly?
Because I'm such a peanut butter cup guy.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
I've still got my desk drawer with quite a few peanut butter cups that students have brought in for me over the school year.
Cool.
But yeah, just Reese's Pieces though, just I don't know, not my thing.
Have you tried the Trader Joe's dark chocolate peanut butter cups?
I have, and I'm not a huge fan.
Okay. Got it.
I like milk chocolate and peanut butter. That's the way to go with peanut butter cups.
Gotcha.
As a kid, I would have gone for Reese's Pieces. As an adult, I would go with the peanut butter M&Ms.
Mm.
So I'll straddle the two choices there and say peanut butter M&Ms.
John, don't straddle anything. That's just not good for anybody.
I know, but
Did you guys know that originally they wanted to use M&Ms in the movie, and the Mars company was like, "No, thank you very much. You make your little alien movie and have a good day."
Yeah, weren't they worried that it was going to be a flop and it wasn't going to make any money? So they're like, "No, don't use this."
Yeah, they didn't want to be associated with it.
Yeah.
So then they went to Reese's and used Reese's Pieces instead. And man, candy sales for Reese's Pieces skyrocketed.
That's outstanding.
So let me quote Nelson from The Simpsons. Ha ha.
I was going to quote Bill the Butcher from Gangs of New York. Whoopsie daisy.
or the Big Lebowski. You can go with the Big Lebowski. Well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, how could you? Oh my gosh, swing and a miss on the ET. Oh geez, that's crazy. That's crazy. You know what? I'd have to say I give M&M's the nod. But I'll tell you this. Reese's I agree with what you're saying with the peanut butter and the chocolate is so good. And I guess it's good too. I can't eat a lot of them. And I remember that even growing up, like I can have some Reese's Pieces, but the law of diminishing returns hits me pretty quick. And so it's like, it's nice because like M&M's, I'll go through like 10 packages and then step on like my best friend to get to more, it's just like, love the M&M's, but the Reese's Pieces, those hit the spot sometimes too.
Well, now that we've solved all the problems in the universe and ET has gotten home safely, very quickly before we do kind of our wrap up for everything and tell people where they can find us on the interwebs, if you were to give this movie a rating out of 5 Reese's Pieces, what rating would you give this movie?
80 trillion, 1,000 million Google 50 infinities.
So again, you're going to make me do math.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm sorry. I was told there would be no math.
Thank you. That's exactly what I said in the last episode last week.
We had a problem.
Thank you.
Week. We had a problem.
I referenced the exact same Chevy Chase skit.
It was my understanding that there would be no math during the debates. Now, I am prepared to answer any domestic questions, perhaps something about me and Betty.
So I am so happy that you and I are the same person.
But I want to change my answer for last week to 5 because of that one thing at the end. But
no,
anyway.
Too late.
Oh gosh, okay.
I got to go back and listen to last week's episode.
Yeah,
I wasn't there for that recording. I got to check that
Pat
out.
was gonna give it a low score until I reminded him of the last like 30 seconds of the movie.
I think the whole thing was a setup for that, and then I'm like, this movie is astoundingly funny.
The movie is now the best thing ever.
Yeah, yeah.
I
know. Oh my god, that's hilarious.
Oh
boy.
All right, Jeff, do I even have to ask what your score is going to be?
This one would, I think, get a solid 5 out of 5.
Yes.
Okay, that's kind of what I figured.
Yes. How often have we seen a perfect movie? I mean, Back to the Future. This.
Did we give Last Crusade all 5s?
Last Crusade would be.
I don't remember if we did or not, but yeah, I mean, I feel like this is one of those few movies that we can pretty confidently like say yes, 5s across the board.
I'm sitting in my man cave right now and I'm looking at all the movie posters I have hanging on the wall, and I got to say I've got some movie posters of some great perfect movies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Almost Famous, Jurassic Park, Rear Window, and Casablanca.
Nice.
Yeah.
You need an ET poster.
I need an ET poster and I need a Roger Rabbit poster.
Yeah.
There you go.
What I don't have is the wall space to hang them.
Well, that's true too.
My dad gets angry. Like he'll just get venomously angry when you talk about the Academy Awards because like the movie Chariots of Fire will come up. My dad will be, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, well, what? He says, well, that came up at the same year as E.T. And you ask me, I mean, what's like the greatest movie ever that came out? E.T. And what did they gave it to that movie? And it was just like, what? It's a bunch of slow-mo. You put anything in slow-mo, it looks good. Meanwhile, you got E.T. and they snubbed him. That's why ever since then, the Academy Awards, forget about it. It's rigged. I mean, my dad just becomes and I'm just like, well, number one, Dad, I can see where I've come from now in my interactions with movies. And 2, I get what you're saying. But I mean, it's just, E.T. is just outstandingly just.
So what you're saying is we should have had your dad on the podcast.
Yeah, I should have
We could tell you if he wants to call him the Love Line, he totally can.
Yeah, I should get him to call in and just tell that. So yeah, I think it's for the birds. It's just for the birds,
Our first time reacting that way to the Oscars was with the year that I think it was Babe, the first Babe movie, and Braveheart were up for Best Picture at the same time. And of course, my brother and sister and I are kids. So when Babe loses to Braveheart, we're all sitting there going, this is stupid.
Mm-hmm.
It's the stupidest thing. And of course, now as an adult, how many times have I watched Babe versus how many times have I watched Braveheart?
Yeah, it's kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our ET episode. That's also going to do it for our month of movies we missed. So we are going to march right on into June for our next one. And our next month is Sex, Drugs, and Roadhouse. So we're going to have Sex, Lies, and Videotape, Drugstore Cowboy, Tango and Cash, and Roadhouse. So that's coming up in the month of June, along with probably sometime in the month of June will be our 250th episode on our favorite cartoons of the 80s. So make sure you're on the lookout for that one too. That's it coming up for the next few weeks here. So if you want to catch up on some of those movies ahead of time before we record those episodes, that's what we got coming up next over the next few weeks. And then if you want to jump back, if you've missed any of the movies that we talked about in the last few weeks, for this last month, we had the movies from earlier in the 80s, or Dream Team was 89 as well. But we had Cannonball Run, we had Dream Team, we had American Werewolf in London, and tonight's was E.T. So if you want to jump back to any of those, that's what we've got recently. If you want to find any of that stuff, go to 30podcast.com. That's our website. It'll connect you up with all the different social media outlets we've got, and our voicemail line, Twitter, Letterboxd, all that stuff. Just go to 30podcast.com. You can find all that stuff. And, once you listen to some of our episodes, if you leave us a review, we'd love to hear from you on any of those places where you get your podcast, whether it's iTunes, Google Play, wherever it might be. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to call in the voicemail line too. If you are Pat's dad and you're listening to this, feel free to call into the voicemail line and tell us the story of why you hate the Academy Awards. We'd love to hear it. So thank you, Pat, and thank you, Jeff, for picking this movie for us.
Hey, this was great to be able to talk about.
Yes.
And thank you to Steven Spielberg for making this movie.
Yeah, I really hope he gets more work, because
I hope he does something with his life. I mean, I don't want him to be like one of those one-hit wonder kind of people.
No, I hope that kid hope that kid gets some work.
Yeah. Maybe he'll do like ET2, Electric Boogaloo. I'd watch it. All right. That's going to do it for us this time. So be excellent to each other. Go watch some good movies, and we'll see you back here for the month of June.
Yeah, guys, we'll see you tomorrow when we all have to sit and discuss what clips of the music we're going to drop into this episode.
I just put the whole bloody thing.
Yeah, it'd probably just be the entire soundtrack that just plays in the background. All right. Everybody take it easy. Have a good one. Go watch some good movies.
Bye now.
Bye.